I sat in my own office, staring at the stack of legal documents Olivia had just placed in front of me. Her smirk was the same one I had fallen in love with years ago, the one that made me believe she was on my side. But today, that smirk was a knife pressed to my throat. "Congratulations, you're officially unemployed," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, thick with fake sympathy. "The company you built? It's mine now." Well, mine and Liam's. Liam. Hearing his name felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I turned my head slightly, catching his smug expression as he stood beside Olivia, arms crossed like some conquering warlord surveying the ruins of his latest conquest. Liam had once been my closest friend, my business partner, the one I trusted to handle the financial side of Cypher Shield while I focused on innovation. We had spent countless sleepless nights in a cramped office, living off coffee and takeout, pouring everything we had into building this company. I had trusted him, confided in him, and let him handle things I had no interest in, things I now realized had given him the power to betray me. And Olivia? She had been the love of my life, the woman I thought would stand by me no matter what. I had met her before Cypher Shield became a billion-dollar company, back when we were struggling to pay rent, when we celebrated our first real investor over cheap wine and laughter. She had been my rock, my supporter, the one who whispered in my ear that I was meant for greatness. And yet, here she was, standing beside the man who had stabbed me in the back. I reached for the papers, not because I needed to read them. I already knew what they said, but because I needed to mask my fury with something tangible. The betrayal hadn't happened overnight. No, this had been a slow, calculated game, and I had been too blind to see it. The late-night meetings Olivia claimed were about company acquisitions, the sudden shifts in board votes, the way Liam started suggesting that I take a break and let others handle the business side, while I focused on development. Piece by piece, they had played me, and I had walked right into their trap. "Maybe you shouldn't have dropped out of school," Olivia mused, crossing her arms. There it was, that mocking condescension, the same thing she used to defend me against when others doubted me. It made my blood boil. I glanced up at her, forcing a smile. "Maybe you shouldn't have underestimated me." She laughed, shaking her head. "You don't get it, do you? It's over. The board voted. You're out." She tapped the papers. "And if you even think about fighting this, our lawyers will make sure you walk away with nothing." Nothing. That was the real message, wasn't it? This wasn't just about taking Cypher Shield. This was about ruining me, making sure I had no leverage, no chance to fight back. Liam leaned in, his smirk widening. "This must suck, huh?" he said, his voice filled with smug amusement. "Losing everything to me." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, pretending to study the documents while my mind worked a different game. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken everything from me. But there was one thing neither of them knew, one thing they never saw coming. Cypher Shield had been my life's work. Years of coding, designing, perfecting the most advanced encryption system on the market. But deep within the system, I had left something they would never see coming. A vulnerability, buried so deep it would take months, maybe years, before they realized what I had done. By then, it would be too late. I glanced at my laptop, resting on the desk beside me. It was still logged into the company's internal systems, something neither of them had thought to revoke yet. Amateurs. I casually flipped it open, typing in my final command. A single keystroke. That was all it took. The script I had embedded months ago, an insurance policy against exactly this kind of betrayal, was activated. It wouldn't destroy Cypher Shield overnight. No, that would be too easy. It would erode it from the inside out. Errors would crop up in their encryption software, small at first, barely noticeable. Clients would start reporting issues, minor glitches that the support team would chalk up to misconfigurations. Then, over time, those glitches would turn into catastrophic failures. Cypher Shield's most lucrative contracts, banks, governments, corporations, would start to experience security breaches, failures that would cost them billions in damages. And Olivia and Liam? They wouldn't realize until it was too late. I pressed enter and closed the laptop. I looked up, seeing Olivia and Liam gloating, reveling in their victory. They had no idea what I had just done. I stood, picking up the small cardboard box containing the last remnants of my office. Pictures, old notes, things that meant something once. I wasn't defeated. I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. As I walked past Olivia and Liam, I caught Liam's smirk widening, his cocky confidence radiating off him in waves. "This must really sting," he said, pretending to sound sympathetic. "Walking out of here with nothing while I take everything you built." I stopped at the door, turned slightly, and met his gaze with calm certainty. "Enjoy it while it lasts." He frowned, but I didn't give him time to respond. I walked out of the office, feeling the weight of betrayal, anger, and determination settle in my chest. They had won this round, but the game was far from over. I walked out of the towering glass building that used to be mine, clutching nothing but a cardboard box filled with the last remnants of a life I had built from scratch. The sunlight felt too bright, the world too loud, yet everything around me felt eerily distant, like I was watching my own downfall from a screen, unable to reach out and change the ending. People passed by, oblivious to the fact that a man who once stood at the top of an empire had just been thrown to the ground. But I wasn't shattered. I wasn't defeated. I was patient. The security guards at the front barely spared me a glance as I stepped onto the sidewalk. I had seen men escorted out before, former executives, employees who had outlived their usefulness. But now it was me. It should have made me feel humiliated, but all I felt was a calm certainty. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. "Mason." I hesitated before answering, taking a moment to school my voice into something controlled. "Tell me," I said, getting straight to the point. "They're gutting R&D, Mason said, his voice tense. "Liam's taking full control next week. They fired half the team this morning, mostly the people who were loyal to you. The ones that stayed? They're on thin ice." I exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel with my free hand. "Good," I murmured. Mason hesitated. "Good. It means they still don't understand what they've taken," I said, my lips curling into a smirk. "If they're cutting people this fast, they won't even notice what's missing until it's too late." CipherShield's entire business model revolved around security encryption, complex, state-of-the-art firewalls that were supposed to be impenetrable. The software I had designed was light years ahead of the competition, the kind of thing that governments and corporations relied on to keep their most sensitive data safe. But there was a fatal flaw buried deep inside the core framework. Not a bug, not a virus, a flaw by design. They had stolen my company, but they had no idea they had stolen a ticking time bomb. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward my apartment, a far cry from the penthouse Olivia and I had once shared. That was hers now too, part of the divorce settlement she had orchestrated before I even saw it coming. But I didn't care. What mattered was on my laptop, the one they hadn't touched. The one with all the backdoors and kill switches I had built over the years, just in case. I arrived at my apartment, a small but efficient space that lacked the polished luxury I had grown used to. But I welcomed it. Luxury made people soft. I needed to be sharp. I placed the cardboard box on the table, ignoring it, and immediately opened my laptop. The cool blue glow of the screen felt like a lifeline, a reminder that no matter what Liam and Olivia thought, they hadn't won yet. I pulled up the encrypted files, the ones containing the hidden failsafe I had embedded deep into CipherShield's main framework. The flaw wasn't obvious. It wasn't something they would find in an audit or catch in a casual code review. It was subtle, a microscopic crack in the foundation that would remain dormant until they tried to expand the system. Once they did, everything would collapse. The flaw worked in stages. First, the encryption would appear to function normally. Clients would onboard, install the software, and trust that their data was protected. But as they scaled up, adding more users, more systems, more reliance, the encryption keys would begin to duplicate incorrectly. A minor issue at first. Then, suddenly, keys would mismatch, causing decryption failures across entire networks. Businesses that trusted CipherShield would wake up one morning to find that their encrypted data was completely unreadable. Millions of dollars in locked files, inaccessible records, corrupted systems. And the best part? There was no fix. Because I was the only one who knew how to patch the flaw, and I wasn't going to lift a damn finger. CipherShield would burn, and by the time they realized they needed me, I'd already be 10 steps ahead. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly, letting the satisfaction settle in my bones. The first domino had been set. I just had to wait for Liam and Olivia to knock it over. I was interrupted by another buzz from my phone. A message from Mason. What's the plan? I stared at the screen for a moment before typing my response. We build something better. A pause. Then another text. Where do we start? I smiled. I already knew. Cypher Shield was a sinking ship, but the industry still needed what I had created. There was a gap in the market, and I was going to fill it before anyone even realized what had happened. Liam and Olivia thought they had taken everything from me. What they didn't realize was that they had simply given me a head start. I stood, stretching out the tension in my shoulders. The night was still young, and there was work to do. I reached for the bottle of whiskey on my counter, pouring myself a glass. A toast, not to revenge, to rebuilding, because the best revenge was taking everything back and making it better than they ever could. I raised the glass to the screen, to the lines of code that held my future, and smirked. Let's see how long you last, Cypher Shield. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, my mind already racing with plans. Sleep had been a distant thought, something I no longer had the luxury of indulging in. Cypher Shield was on the clock, and every second that ticked by was another step toward their inevitable collapse. But I couldn't do this alone. I needed my team. The people who had actually built Cypher Shield, the ones who understood the core of the technology better than anyone. Not the corporate suits, not the board members, not Liam and Olivia's hand-picked replacements. The real architects. Mason was already in. He had been with me since the beginning, back when Cypher Shield was nothing but an idea scrawled on a whiteboard in my garage. He had been the one pulling all-nighters with me, writing the first iterations of our encryption software, perfecting the algorithm that made Cypher Shield what it was. If there was anyone I trusted, it was him. But I needed more than just Mason. So I made some calls. By noon, we were sitting in a quiet coffee shop in the heart of the city, away from prying eyes. The kind of place where no one would pay attention to a group of tech geeks huddled around a table, whispering about the future. Mason was already there when I arrived, his laptop open, fingers tapping anxiously against his coffee cup. Next to him sat Isabella, our lead cryptographer. She was the one who had built the decryption mechanisms that made Cypher Shield's software bulletproof, except for the flaw I had planted. If anyone could help me build something even stronger, it was her. Then there was Leo, our head of security. He wasn't just a coder, he was a strategist. The kind of guy who could predict threats before they even happened, the one who always asked, but what if, when we designed new systems? He had been skeptical of Olivia and Liam for months, but I had ignored his warnings. That mistake wouldn't happen again. And finally, Clara. Clara was the only person in HR I had ever trusted. She wasn't just an administrator, she knew people. She had connections in the industry, ties to investors, a way of understanding power moves before they were even made. If I was going to rebuild, I needed her insight just as much as I needed the technical expertise of the others. I sat down, folding my hands on the table. For a moment, there was silence. Then Isabella leaned forward, her eyes sharp. All right, just tell us. What's the plan? I took a slow breath. We all know what Olivia and Liam are doing, I said, keeping my voice even. They think they own Cypher Shield, but they don't own the real technology. We do. Mason rubbed his temple. You're saying the version they stole doesn't actually work? I smirked. Oh, it works. But only at first. The flaw is subtle. It won't crash immediately. But when they try to implement it at scale, everything will fall apart. Leo let out a low chuckle. Man, that's evil. I love it. Clara gave me a knowing look. And I'm guessing you have a backup plan? I nodded. We start over. We build something better. And when they fail, we'll be there to take everything back. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, one filled with blueprints, diagrams, and lines of code that I had been working on for months. Cypher Shield had been great, but it wasn't perfect. I had ideas. Ways to improve the encryption, ways to make the system more advanced, more impenetrable. If we executed this right, we wouldn't just compete with Cypher Shield. We'd destroy them. I slid the folder across the table. This is Quantum Sentinel. For pairs of eyes locked onto the documents, scanning through them with silent intensity. Mason was the first to speak. This is next-level encryption. If we pull this off, it'll make Cypher Shield look like a toy. Exactly, I said. I've already started coding the framework. But I need all of you. I need your expertise, your skills, your connections. We don't have the luxury of time. If we want to do this, we move now. Leo tapped his fingers against the table. We're going up against a billion-dollar company. They have resources, lawyers, investors who will back them even when things start falling apart. For now, I countered. But when their encryption fails, when businesses start losing millions because their data is inaccessible, do you think investors will stick around? No, they'll look for an alternative. And we'll be ready. Isabella exhaled, running a hand through her hair. All right, I'm in. Mason nodded. You already know I'm in. Leo smirked. Screwing over Cypher Shield? How could I say no? Clara studied me for a long moment before finally leaning back in her chair. I'll handle outreach. Investors, hiring, setting up meetings. But we need funding. We need a base of operations. We need everything Cypher Shield had. Without the corruption. We'll get it, I promised. Because we're not just building a company. We're building a movement. One that stands for what Cypher Shield was supposed to be, before Olivia and Liam turned it into a corporate graveyard. A pause. Then, one by one, they reached out, stacking their hands on top of mine in the center of the table. Let's do this. This wasn't just a revenge play anymore. This was a war. And I wasn't just going to win. I was going to erase them from the industry entirely. The days that followed were a storm of relentless motion. There was no time for hesitation, no room for second-guessing. Every minute counted. Every action had a purpose. While Olivia and Liam basked in their so-called victory, their grip on Cypher Shield tightening, my team and I were already setting the stage for their inevitable collapse. I spent my nights refining Quantum Sentinel, fine-tuning the encryption layers, strengthening the architecture, ensuring that when we launched, it would be a fortress unlike anything Cypher Shield could ever hope to rival. My fingers blurred over the keyboard, pushing out line after line of code. Every keystroke was a step forward, every algorithm a piece of the empire I was building from the ground up. And then, as if right on cue, I got the message I had been waiting for. It was past midnight when my phone buzzed on the desk beside me. I didn't need to check to know who it was. Mason, it's happening. They just tried to implement the system with their first big client. I stared at the message for a long moment, letting the words settle. Then, a slow, satisfied smirk pulled at the corner of my lips. I clicked on my laptop, pulling up the real-time security feed of Cypher Shield's internal servers. The privilege should have been revoked when I was forced out, but they had underestimated me. A fatal mistake. With a few keystrokes, I bypassed the back-end authentication and slipped into their system undetected. It took less than a minute to locate the main control panel, and there it was, chaos unfolding in real time. Their encryption framework was failing, just as I had designed it to. I leaned back, watching as the error logs flooded in, red text flashing against the black background. The flaw was working exactly as intended, not an outright crash, not something that would immediately raise alarms. No, it was subtler than that. It corrupted security certificates, made decryption sequences unstable. Clients were beginning to report intermittent failures, small issues at first, locked files, encrypted documents failing to open. But those issues would snowball. Soon, they would escalate to system-wide failures, rendering entire databases unreadable. And Cypher Shield had no way to fix it, because the only person who knew how to patch the flaw was sitting in a dimly lit apartment, watching it all unfold with a glass of whiskey in hand. I took my time, savoring the moment, before responding to Mason's message. Me. How bad is it? A few minutes later, he replied. Mason. Stock prices already dropping. Liam called an emergency meeting. Olivia's freaking out. This is it. I allowed myself a single breath of satisfaction. They were scrambling, panicking, and they still had no idea who was behind it. I switched tabs, pulling up the stock market feed. Cypher Shield shares, which had been soaring after my departure, were now in free fall. Investors were spooked, clients were demanding answers, and the board of directors, the same board that had voted me out, was facing the kind of backlash they hadn't anticipated. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed again. A call this time. Olivia. I let it ring, watched as it went to voicemail. Then, not even a minute later, another call. Liam. I ignored that too. And then, the text messages started. Olivia. I know you did this. Fix it. I chuckled softly. The audacity. Then another message. Liam. We need to talk. If you don't help us, we'll sue. That one made me laugh out loud. They would sue? On what grounds? For implementing a security framework they stole from me? For firing the one person who actually understood the system? Pathetic. Still, I didn't respond. Let them stew in their failure. Instead, I turned my attention to Quantum Sentinel. We were already ahead of schedule. Isabella had nearly completed the core encryption module. Leo had been running extensive penetration tests, ensuring it was flawless. Clara had been making calls, setting up meetings with potential investors who were already sensing the shift in power. Cypher Shield's downfall wasn't just about revenge. It was about replacing them, taking their clients, their investors, their place in the market, and doing it better. I poured myself another drink, watching the data scroll across the screen. Clients were dropping Cypher Shield by the hour, scrambling for alternatives. They were still in damage control mode, still trying to contain the crisis. They wouldn't succeed, because what they didn't realize was that this wasn't a temporary malfunction. It was the beginning of the end. Cypher Shield was bleeding, and I wasn't going to let them stop the hemorrhaging. I stood, stretching out the tension in my shoulders. The city outside my window was alive, lights flickering, streets buzzing. Somewhere out there, Olivia and Liam were desperately trying to put out a fire they would never be able to control. I took a sip of my drink, relishing the smooth burn of whiskey down my throat. This is what happens when you steal from the wrong man. Then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife even deeper, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message from Olivia or Liam. It was a notification from one of my contacts in the industry. Cypher Shield's biggest client, a multi-billion-dollar banking corporation, had just announced they were pulling out of their contract. The cracks in the foundation had turned into fractures, and soon, Cypher Shield would crumble entirely. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of my modest apartment, casting slanted patterns of light across the room. I sat at my desk, eyes fixed on the laptop screen, where Cypher Shield's internal systems were displayed in real time. Error messages cascaded down the interface, each one a testament to the chaos unfolding within the company. Clients were experiencing widespread system failures, their encrypted data becoming inaccessible. Panic spread as businesses scrambled to understand why their security measures had crumbled. The flaw I had embedded deep within Cypher Shield's encryption was executing its design flawlessly. As the hours passed, Cypher Shield's stock prices plummeted. Investors, once confident in the company's trajectory, were now frantically offloading shares. The media caught wind of the turmoil, headlines highlighting the company's rapid descent. Inside Cypher Shield's headquarters, Olivia was in crisis mode. Emergency meetings were convened, engineers were summoned to troubleshoot, and blame was cast in every direction. The very foundation of the company was unraveling, and they were powerless to stop it. My phone buzzed on the desk, the screen displaying Olivia's name. I let it ring, the sound a reminder of the power shift that had occurred. Moments later, a notification indicated a new voicemail. Then, another call, this time from Liam. I ignored it as well, savoring the irony of their desperation. Text messages followed. Olivia, I know you did this. Fix it. Liam, this is your fault. If you don't help us, we'll sue. I leaned back in my chair, a wry smile tugging at my lips. The empire they had seized was collapsing, and they were grasping at straws, seeking assistance from the very person they had betrayed. Turning my attention back to the screen, I observed as Cypher Shield's clients began severing ties. Major corporations issued statements distancing themselves from the failing security provider, citing irreparable breaches of trust. The exodus was swift and unforgiving. Quizlet.com +1 YouTube.com +1. Amidst the chaos, Quantum Sentinel was gaining momentum. Our team had anticipated this moment, and Clara had been in discussions with potential clients, positioning us as the reliable alternative. As Cypher Shield's reputation disintegrated, Quantum Sentinel emerged as the beacon of stability. Investors took notice. The same entities that had once backed Cypher Shield were now approaching us, eager to align with a company that prioritized integrity and innovation. Meetings were scheduled, contracts were drafted, and Quantum Sentinel's future solidified. Quizlet.com. I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led to this point. The betrayal by Olivia and Liam had been a catalyst, but it had also been an opportunity. An opportunity to rebuild, to create something resilient and unassailable. As evening approached, I received a call from Mark Delacroix, Cypher Shield's largest investor. His tone was measured, but the underlying urgency was unmistakable. "We need to talk," he began. I remained silent, allowing him to continue. Cypher Shield is in freefall. The board is in disarray, and clients are abandoning ship. We need a solution. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. And what do you propose? There was a pause, the weight of the situation settling between us. We need you to fix this, he admitted. You're the only one who understands the system well enough to salvage it. I considered his words, the vindication they carried. And what would that entail? Mark exhaled, the sound heavy with resignation. Full control. The board is prepared to reinstate you as CEO. Olivia and Liam will be removed, effective immediately. The offer was tempting, but I had built Quantum Sentinel to stand apart from Cypher Shield Shadow. I have my own venture now, Mark. Quantum Sentinel is thriving. We can discuss a merger, he countered. Your team, your technology, integrated into Cypher Shield. You'd have the resources and infrastructure to expand globally. I leaned back, contemplating the proposition. A merger would accelerate Quantum Sentinel's growth, providing access to Cypher Shield's existing contracts and networks. But it would also mean re-entering an environment tainted by betrayal. I'll consider it, I replied finally. But understand this, Mark, any agreement would be on my terms. Quantum Sentinel's principles are non-negotiable. Of course, he agreed hastily. We'll await your decision. After the call ended, I sat in silence, weighing the options. The flames consuming Cypher Shield were a testament to the consequences of greed and deception. Whether I chose to extinguish those flames or let the company burn to ashes was a decision that required careful deliberation. For now, I would watch the fire burn, mindful of the lessons it imparted, and chart the course for Quantum Sentinel with unwavering resolve. Sources. The next call came just 3 hours later. I had been expecting it. As Cypher Shield's foundation crumbled, as their systems buckled under the weight of their own greed, Olivia finally broke. Her name flashed across my phone screen, the device buzzing with an urgency that mirrored the panic I knew was consuming her. I let it ring, once, twice, before I finally picked up. What do you want, Olivia? I asked, my voice calm measured. There was a pause. For the first time in years, she sounded uncertain. I need you to fix this. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of her words settle over me. Fix what? I asked, feigning ignorance. She exhaled sharply, irritation creeping into her tone. Don't play games, you know exactly what. Cypher Shield is falling apart. The encryption system is failing. Our biggest clients are threatening legal action. The board is breathing down my neck. I know you did this. Her voice wavered at the end. That was new. Olivia never wavered. I let a slow, knowing smirk cross my lips. You mean the security framework? The one you stole? I asked, my tone light, as if we were discussing the weather. Silence. For once, she had nothing to say. I could almost picture her, standing in the glass office she had stolen from me, phone clutched in a manicured hand, her once pristine confidence crumbling like the company around her. The one that doesn't actually work without the final patches? I pressed. Her sharp intake of breath was all the confirmation I needed. She knew she was trapped. We'll pay you, she said finally, her voice tight. I chuckled. You think I'd sell you the solution? After what you did? I let the question hang in the air, giving her a moment to digest the absurdity of her own desperation. Olivia had spent months orchestrating my downfall, had ripped Cypher Shield from my hands, had sided with the one man I had trusted most, and now she wanted to buy me off like some underpaid consultant? She had always been good at manipulating people. Too bad for her. I wasn't one of them anymore. You don't have a choice, she snapped, her frustration boiling over. You think I don't know what you're doing? You set this up from the start. You sabotaged the company. That's illegal, by the way. You could go to prison for this. I laughed. Not just a chuckle this time. A full, unapologetic laugh. You really don't get it, do you? I said, shaking my head. I didn't sabotage Cypher Shield. You did. The moment you thought you could steal something you didn't understand, that was the moment you signed its death certificate. She didn't respond right away. Good. Let her feel it. When she finally spoke again, the fire was gone from her voice. What do you want? She asked quietly. Oh, now we were getting somewhere. Simple, I said. I want everything back. Full control. You're out. Liam? He's out. And you'll sign away every last share you own. Her breath hitched. That's insane. No, Olivia, I said, voice turning to ice. What's insane is thinking you could betray me and still come out on top. I let her sit with that for a moment. Cypher Shield wasn't worth saving, not to me. But Olivia didn't need to know that. I had no intention of patching their broken systems. No desire to salvage the mess she and Liam had made. I just wanted to watch her lose. Fine, she spat. We'll discuss it with the board. There is no we. Olivia, I corrected. You'll tell the board that if they want a chance at survival, they'll hand me full control. Otherwise, well, you've seen what's happening to your stock prices, haven't you? She cursed under her breath. I could hear the weight of it settling on her shoulders. Cypher Shield had been her crowning achievement, the thing she had ripped from my hands and held up as her own success. And now she had to choose between watching it collapse completely or giving it back to the one man who would never let her forget how badly she had lost. I'll set up a meeting, she said, voice tight. You do that, I said. Then, before she could say anything else, I hung up. I set my phone down, exhaling slowly, feeling the tension bleed out of me. She had taken everything from me. Now, it was my turn. I turned my attention back to my laptop, where Quantum Sentinel's launch schedule was laid out. Investors were lining up. Former Cypher Shield clients were already reaching out, desperate for a security solution they could trust. Cypher Shield wasn't my future anymore, but I would make damn sure Olivia had no future at all. This wasn't just about taking back what was mine. It was about destroying what was hers. Because the best revenge was making sure she had nothing left to steal. The meeting was set for Friday morning. I wasn't surprised. Olivia was predictable, desperate to patch the gaping hole in Cypher Shield before investors abandoned ship completely. But no amount of rush damage control would save her now. I had made sure of that. Mason, Isabella, Leo, and Clara met me the night before at a quiet, private office space I had rented out downtown. Our new home base. The beginnings of Quantum Sentinel's headquarters. Are you really considering going back? Mason asked, leaning forward with a skeptical expression. No, I said simply. But they don't know that. Leo smirked. So we're letting them think they have a chance. Exactly. I opened my laptop, pulling up the latest Cypher Shield data breach reports. Cypher Shield is hemorrhaging money. They've lost 3 major clients in the last 24 hours. Lawsuits are already being drafted. Clara whistled, shaking her head. I almost feel bad for them. I chuckled. Don't. Olivia and Liam had dug their own grave. All I had done was hand them a shovel. Here's how this is going to go, I said, meeting their eyes one by one. Tomorrow, Olivia and the board will offer me a deal. They'll try to negotiate, spin it like I'm the only one who can save the company. I'll tell them I want full control. No compromises. Isabella raised a brow. And if they agree? I smirked. They won't. Because if Olivia had one thing left, it was pride. And she wouldn't let go of Cypher Shield without a fight. She'd rather burn it to the ground before handing it back to me. Which was exactly what I wanted. Once they refuse, I continued, I'll walk out. And by the time their stock crashes completely, we'll be ready to launch Quantum Sentinel. Mason leaned back, nodding in approval. Savage. It's business, I corrected. And tomorrow, we finish what they started. Friday morning, the meeting. Cypher Shield's boardroom hadn't changed. Same polished oak table. Same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Same people who had voted me out, now pretending they weren't on the verge of total collapse. Olivia sat at the head of the table, her face carefully composed, but I knew the cracks were there. The sleepless nights. The stress. The weight of watching everything she stole slip through her fingers. Liam wasn't here. Interesting. Had she finally realized he was dead weight? Or had he bailed the moment things got rough? Either way, it didn't matter. I took my seat, adjusting my cufflinks as I let them sweat in silence for a few seconds longer than necessary. Shall we begin? Olivia finally said, her voice tight. By all means, I replied, leaning back. What's your offer? A man I didn't recognize cleared his throat. A new investor, probably. One of the desperate ones trying to salvage their stake. We would like to bring you back on as CEO, he said smoothly. With complete creative and operational control over Cypher Shield's future. I hummed, pretending to consider it. And Olivia? I asked. She stiffened, but before she could speak, another board member interjected. She will step down. I turned to her, studying her carefully. This wasn't voluntary. She was backed into a corner, and it was killing her. Generous, I said. But I have a counteroffer. The tension in the room thickened. I don't want creative control, I said, tapping my fingers against the table. I want full control. No board interference. No advisors. I own everything. A murmur spread through the room. That's unreasonable, someone finally snapped. No, I corrected. Unreasonable was stealing a company you didn't understand and expecting it to survive. Olivia's hands clenched in her lap. She knew I was right. Your encryption system is failing, I continued. Your biggest clients are gone. Your reputation is in the gutter. You don't have time to negotiate, so this is the deal. Either I own Cypher Shield entirely, or I walk away, and you watch it die. Silence. The investors shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. They knew they were screwed. Then Olivia spoke, her voice clipped. You're asking for too much. I smiled. There it was. Then I guess we're done here, I said, rising to my feet. The board erupted into whispers. Olivia's face was stone cold, but I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. She had been so sure I'd take the bait, that I'd come crawling back just to reclaim what was mine. She didn't understand. I had already won. Without another word, I turned and walked out. And as the doors closed behind me, I knew Cypher Shield was finished. That afternoon, Quantum Sentinel's future. Back at our office, I relayed the outcome of the meeting to my team. So they let you walk? Mason asked, raising a brow. Of course, I said, pouring myself a drink. They were never going to give up control. They still think they can fix this. But they can't, Isabella said, smirking. No, I agreed. They can't. Cypher Shield's final collapse was now a matter of time. What's next? Clara asked, leaning forward. I took a sip of my whiskey before answering. We launch Quantum Sentinel. Leo grinned. When? I set my glass down. Monday. Sunday night. The final blow. Cypher Shield's downfall hit the headlines like a nuclear bomb. Cypher Shield stock plummets as clients withdraw. CEO Olivia Spencer under fire. Lawsuits mount against failing security firm. Market in chaos. Tech giants collapse paves the way for new security leader, Quantum Sentinel. And at the center of it all, me. I leaned back in my chair, watching the reports flood in. Cypher Shield was done. And Quantum Sentinel. It was only just beginning. Monday morning arrived with the kind of buzz I hadn't felt in years. Not the anxious, stomach-churning anticipation that came with waiting for board votes or investor calls, but the kind of charged energy that told me history was about to be made. Cypher Shield was on its last breath. Quantum Sentinel was about to take its first full stride into the world. I stood by the window of our new office, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, watching the city stir awake beneath me. It was poetic, really, the end of one empire and the rise of another, all unfolding beneath these same city lights. Behind me, Mason and Isabella were already finalizing the launch sequence. Our encryption software had been rigorously tested, refined, and battle-proofed over the past few months. It wasn't just better than Cypher Shield, it was a generation ahead. A single press release was all it took. Within the first 10 minutes, our website was flooded with inquiries from former Cypher Shield clients looking for a safe, immediate alternative. The panic on Wall Street had already set in over the weekend, and investors were scrambling for a lifeline. Quantum Sentinel was that lifeline. Clara turned to me, her phone pressed to her ear. Mark Delacroix is calling. Cypher Shield's largest investor. I smirked, shaking my head. Now they wanted to talk. Put him through, I said. A moment later, his voice crackled through the speaker. We need to talk. You sound stressed, Mark, I said, sipping my coffee. Everything okay? Cut the crap, he snapped. You knew this was coming. Cypher Shield is on the verge of collapse, and you're the only one who can stop it. I sighed dramatically. That's unfortunate. But I don't run Cypher Shield anymore. Remember? Damn it, don't play games, Mark growled. I have the board breathing down my neck, clients demanding answers, and a stock price that's falling like a goddamn meteor. You already won, so name your price. I turned to Mason and Isabella, who were listening in with grins that mirrored my own. My price. I repeated. You mean to tell me that after everything Olivia and Liam did to push me out, after all the backstabbing, now you want me to come back and clean up their mess? You know as well as I do that Cypher Shield is bigger than Olivia. This is business, and you're in the perfect position to take it back, he countered. I leaned against my desk, letting his words sink in, not for me, but for him. He needed to hear the truth in the silence that followed. Cypher Shield is already dead, I said finally. It just doesn't know it yet. Mark exhaled heavily. That's not how investors see it. If you step in now, take control, you can salvage it. Why would I want to salvage something broken? I asked. When I've already built something better? There was a long pause. Quantum Sentinel, he said, his voice flat. That's right, I confirmed. You had this planned all along. No, I corrected. I had a backup plan all along. You're just realizing it too late. I could hear him shifting in his chair, likely rubbing his temple in frustration. What if we merge? He asked, his tone turning from desperate to calculating. You take over Cypher Shield, merge it with Quantum Sentinel, and use its infrastructure to expand. I glanced at Clara, who was already shaking her head. No deal, I said. Think about it. I did, I cut in. You don't seem to understand, Mark. Cypher Shield is a sinking ship. I don't need its infrastructure. I don't need its board. I don't need its investors. I built Cypher Shield from nothing once. I can do it again, only this time, without the dead weight. This is a mistake, Mark warned. No, I said. This is me taking back what's mine, without any of you leeches attached to it. And with that, I ended the call. An hour later, the final blow. Cypher Shield filed for bankruptcy by noon. The headlines flooded the internet within minutes. Cypher Shield crashes. CEO Olivia Spencer resigns amidst scandal. Tech giant falls as investors flee. Quantum Sentinel emerges as new industry leader. Former Cypher Shield CEO reclaims industry spotlight with revolutionary security firm. And just like that, the company I built was gone. Not because I destroyed it, but because Olivia and Liam were never meant to hold it in the first place. That afternoon, I stood in front of our Quantum Sentinel team. Cypher Shield is gone, I announced, my voice clear, steady. But we're not just here to replace them. We're here to be better. To build a security firm that actually protects its clients, rather than just selling them lies. There was a murmur of approval, nods all around. Today, I continued, we don't just start a company. We start a movement. A movement that would define the industry. A movement that Olivia and Liam could never be part of. A movement that was truly mine. That evening, the closure I never needed. I sat in my office, feet up on my desk, sipping the last of my coffee as I stared at the framed document on the shelf. The one Olivia had given me the day she stole Cypher Shield. Congratulations, you're officially unemployed. I let out a breath. I had kept it as a reminder, a symbol of what I had lost. But now, I didn't need it anymore. I pulled it off the shelf, stared at it for a moment longer, then dropped it into the trash. Cypher Shield was the past. Quantum Sentinel was the future. And for the first time in years, I was finally free. The world moved fast in the tech industry, but nothing compared to the free fall Cypher Shield had endured in just a matter of days. By the time I walked into Quantum Sentinel's headquarters on Tuesday morning, Cypher Shield was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a footnote in the history of corporate greed and arrogance. Olivia was gone. Liam had disappeared. The board had dissolved. Cypher Shield had officially filed for bankruptcy, and the last of its clients were frantically scrambling to find a replacement before their data security completely collapsed. And who was waiting with open arms? Quantum Sentinel. I stood in front of the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, watching the city buzz below. My name was everywhere, in newspapers, on business blogs, in tech circles. Some called it the most brilliant revenge in corporate history. Others called it the tech coup no one saw coming. Either way, I had won. But I wasn't finished yet. The acquisition play. The morning was a blur of meetings and calls. The world was watching as Quantum Sentinel absorbed the market Cypher Shield had left behind. Clara had already fielded dozens of calls from investors who had once backed Cypher Shield, the same ones who had ignored me when I was forced out. Now, they were eager to jump ship, hoping to attach themselves to the new industry leader. Mark Delacroix is on the line, Clara announced, stepping into my office. I smirked, shaking my head. Mark had been one of the biggest Cypher Shield investors, the same man who had called me just days ago, begging me to come back. Now, he was calling as a desperate man with nowhere else to turn. Put him through, I said, leaning back in my chair. A second later, his voice crackled over the speaker. Congratulations, he started, his voice carefully measured. Appreciate it, I said smoothly. What can I do for you, Mark? A pause. I knew what was coming. Cypher Shield's remaining assets are up for grabs, he said. Its patents, intellectual property, leftover contracts. We can sell it off piece by piece, or I let the silence stretch between us. Or, I prompted. Or you buy it outright, he said. Take what's left and fold it into Quantum Sentinel. You get the infrastructure, the client databases, the government contracts, without the baggage. I let out a slow exhale. This was exactly what I had been waiting for. Cypher Shield wasn't worth saving, but its remnants were valuable. Its patents, its research, its exclusive government encryption deals. If I could strip it for parts and integrate its best pieces into Quantum Sentinel, we'd dominate the industry overnight. But I wasn't about to let Mark know how much I wanted it. Why would I pay for something that's already dead? I asked, letting my voice drip with disinterest. Because if you don't, someone else will, he countered. And let's be honest, you don't want competition. I chuckled, as if there was any competition left. What's the asking price? I asked. 30 million, he said without hesitation. I almost laughed out loud. Cypher Shield had been valued at over $5 billion just 6 months ago. And now, it was being sold for scraps. 15, I said flatly. 25, he shot back. 17, I countered. Final offer. You and I both know no one else is stepping up to buy a sinking ship. A long silence. I could hear the gears turning in his head. Done, he finally said, his voice tight. I smiled. Pleasure doing business with you, Mark, I said before hanging up. And just like that, Cypher Shield belonged to me again. The takeover. By noon, the news had hit every major outlet. Quantum Sentinel acquires Cypher Shield's assets in a game-changing move. The return of the founder. Tech genius reclaims his empire in stunning business maneuver. Cypher Shield is no more. Meet the company that just took over the industry. I leaned back in my chair, scrolling through the headlines, feeling the weight of the victory settle in my bones. Cypher Shield was mine again, but this time, it wouldn't exist under that name. The first order of business? Erase its identity. By the end of the week, Cypher Shield's website had been rebranded, its name scrubbed from every legal document, every piece of intellectual property transferred to Quantum Sentinel. Cypher Shield wasn't just dead. It had been buried. Olivia's legacy? Erased. Liam? Nowhere to be found. I had built something better, and now, nothing stood in my way. The final goodbye. Late that night, I took a drive. Not through the bustling streets of the city, not toward the high-rise office buildings that now bore my company's name. Instead, I drove past Cypher Shield's former headquarters, the towering glass structure that once belonged to me. It was still standing, but the lights were off. The security guards that had once barely spared me a glance were now stationed at the doors, watching over an empty building with no future. For a long time, I sat in my car, staring up at it. I had built that company with my own 2 hands. And in the end, it had crumbled without me. I thought I would feel anger, or maybe even bitterness. But I felt nothing at all, because I wasn't looking back anymore. Cypher Shield had been my past. Quantum Sentinel was my future. I turned the key in the ignition, leaving the ruins of my former empire behind me. As I drove away, a sense of finality settled over me. For the first time in a long time, I was free. The morning after the acquisition, I woke up before dawn. Not because I was anxious, not because I was worried about the next step, but because I had already won. For months, I had moved with a singular focus, taking back what was mine. And now? Now, there was nothing left to take. I had reclaimed my empire, destroyed my enemies, and built something even greater than before. But victory wasn't just about taking back control. It was about ensuring they had nothing left. I poured myself a coffee, the city stretching out beyond my apartment windows, the skyline bathed in the early hues of sunrise. I had a full day ahead of me, meetings, strategy sessions, finalizing the Cypher Shield integration into Quantum Sentinel. But for now, I took a moment to breathe. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated for a second before answering. Hello. A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in weeks. I hope you're happy. Olivia. I let out a slow breath, leaning against the counter. I am actually. Thanks for asking. She scoffed. You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? I smirked. What exactly do you think I planned? Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I mean, she snapped. You set Cypher Shield up to fail, then sat back and watched it collapse. And now you own it again, but only to bury it. It was never about the company, was it? This was about revenge. I took a sip of my coffee, letting her words settle. No, Olivia, I said, my voice calm. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge would have been destroying Cypher Shield and walking away. This was about winning. Silence. I could almost picture her, pacing in whatever apartment or hotel room she was holed up in, seething, clinging to whatever was left of her pride. Congratulations, she muttered bitterly. You got what you wanted. No, I corrected. I got what I built. You just tried to steal it, and you weren't smart enough to keep it. Another pause. Then, the question I knew was coming. Is there any way back from this? I laughed. Not a chuckle, a real, unfiltered laugh. Back from what? I asked. Cypher Shield is gone. Your career is over. No one in the industry will ever trust you again. And Liam? Well, let's just say I doubt he's answering your calls right now. Her sharp inhale told me I had struck a nerve. I made one mistake, she whispered. No, Olivia, I said, my tone turning ice cold. You made every mistake. You betrayed the wrong person. You trusted the wrong partner. And you underestimated the man who built the very thing you thought you could steal. That's not just one mistake. That's a series of fatal errors. More silence. Then, finally, she sighed. I suppose you're not interested in working together again, are you? I blinked. Was she actually serious? You think after everything you did, I'd ever let you anywhere near my company? I asked, incredulous. We were good together once, she murmured. Yeah, I said, until you chose greed over loyalty. And with that, I hung up. The final move. I didn't think about Olivia again after that. I didn't need to. Cypher Shield was officially erased from existence, and Quantum Sentinel was already dominating the market. Every former Cypher Shield client was now in contract with us. The investors who had once doubted me, now begging to be part of the new future. I spent the next 2 months overseeing the integration, ensuring that every last piece of Cypher Shield's technology was either repurposed or discarded entirely. And then, one morning, I walked into the Quantum Sentinel boardroom for an announcement. As of today, I told them, we are officially removing the last remnants of Cypher Shield from our infrastructure. Any remaining legacy clients who refuse to transition will be dropped. Any partnerships linked to Cypher Shield's name will be dissolved. From this moment forward, Cypher Shield no longer exists. A round of nods, murmurs of approval. Mason grinned. Poetic, really. Clara chuckled. So what's next? I smiled. Now, we build something they could never even dream of. 1 year later, I stood on the stage, a packed conference room in front of me, a massive Quantum Sentinel logo displayed on the screen behind me. A year ago, the cybersecurity world was in chaos. I began. A company that once claimed to be the best in the industry failed because it was built on lies, greed, and incompetence. A pause. But from those ashes, we built something stronger. Today, Quantum Sentinel is not just leading the industry. We are redefining it. Applause erupted from the audience. I scanned the crowd, my eyes landing on familiar faces, investors, clients, employees who had stood by me from the beginning. Olivia wasn't here. Neither was Liam. They had become irrelevant, ghosts of a failed past. And me? I was standing at the top again. The best revenge, I said, locking eyes with the press cameras, isn't destroying your enemies. It's making sure they live long enough to watch you succeed without them. Another round of applause. I stepped back from the podium, shaking hands, taking in the moment. And as I walked off the stage, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about legacy. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing victory. I had already won.